Thomas, how you doing?
Good, good. How are you, Tim?
Good, good. I'm really happy to have you on. I think you're on to talk about a topic that I think a lot of people either know a lot about or not so much about, but I never find people in between. So,
Yes, it is because I think Tableau is such an interesting product that bring about like visualization to data that a lot of people they're drawn to that, but there are also a huge group of people who know a lot about data and they have
yeah,
not visualizations and new thing to them.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly. So, yeah, we last spoke. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, right? We were trying to set this up, and
yeah,
we've actually been trying to set this up for some time. I've also told you that I'm going to soon be doing a video with Kirk Monroe about the data model, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the channel is because I think this conversation needs like sort of many sides of the same coin to be discussed at the same time.
yeah,
And your perspective from, I guess, Tableau or Salesforce's perspective is really valuable because I
yeah,
think you can piece together a really important part of like the direction of this capability and what its sort of true potential is. Because I think as stuff comes out, sometimes I think the community takes a bit of time just to sort of catch up. So I'm super excited about the conversation.
yeah.
We should probably start with who are you, what do you do, and then we can get stuck in as we go along. So over to you.
Sounds great. So a brief intro about myself. So this is my 8th year at Tableau. Now we're part of Salesforce.
Wow.
So my career in data actually started when I was in graduate school,
All right.
training to become a scientist. And that's when I started analyzing a lot of data. And from then on out, that's when I developed a passion for analyzing data, not just using the empirical method that we have using statistics, but also
Right.
start using machine learning as well.
Okay.
And from then on out, that I became a product manager at Microsoft Office. One side project I did was actually analyzing and actually instrumenting the Office and analyzing the telemetry data from them. And
Oh,
then
wow.
that's why I discovered Tableau.
I see. So you're using Tableau to analyze Microsoft Office.
Not exactly. We're not allowed to do that. We have to use Excel, and also at that time a little bit of Power BI, but mostly Excel.
Right.
And actually, that's why I learned DAX and how to use within Power BI.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Wow.
So in that very Microsoft environment, they have a pretty closed ecosystem, right? Everything
Right.
tool sets already built within Microsoft.
Yeah.
And then I went over to a team in Windows to analyzing the massive amount of telemetry coming
Okay.
back from Windows. And
All
that's
right.
why I learn about dashboarding, how people turn data into action and making decision.
Amazing. And that's when
Yeah.
you
So
discovered
that's
Tableau.
that's how I always driven by like the idea of how do you turn something really raw data and get as quickly as possible something that insight that you can act on.
Yeah. That telemetry is that's a huge amount of data, right? It's not,
Yeah.
but like telemetry is probably measured in petabytes per day or something like that. I don't know. You probably can't share that number, but like
Yep.
that's serious amounts of data, right?
Yeah, especially Windows. Think of the number of people using Windows, right? And the amount of data
Yeah.
coming back. Yeah,
Yeah. That's
regularly.
incredible. And,
Yeah.
and, and so like you discovered Tableau, but then like, did you use the product first or did you see a job
I did
opening?
not.
No. Okay.
I did
You
not.
didn't.
Actually used the product in preparation for interview at Tableau.
Oh, I
And to be
see.
honest, at that time there was no Tableau Tim. And then so just finding the using the pill was such an alien concept, right?
Right.
And to me, creating the first calculation is like, oh my God, this is in many ways is a very easy transition from doing Excel into Tableau, except the conceptual and the abstraction layers within Tableau was
Yeah.
fascinating to me.
Right.
So in my interview with Tableau my job at that time was to figure out like how do we solve this whole sorting problem that has been bugging Tableau for the last 16 years of its existence. And that
Okay.
was my job. So you know about nested sorting, that's what my
Yeah.
first feature worked on. Yeah.
Oh wow, nested sorting. Gosh, nested sorting. When that got fixed, that was a stand-up moment in conference. I remember when you showed the
True.
demo, and because
Yeah.
it kind of used to work, but it didn't work the way you thought it worked. And I think
Yep.
there was a good explanation for it. And then when Tableau fixed it, it felt like it works like it should do now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really goes to like the founder has a certain vision how they see the world, but that of course that world doesn't really match with the expectation of customer, given the issue that they have with data analysis, right? So so that took quite a bit of work on our end and the back end side. So ever since then, I've been sort of tackling more of the difficult problems with Tableau, like long-standing problems with Tableau, and how do we continue to make the product be more inclusive and have more people using it with the type of data they need to have within Tableau. So,
And so just to touch on the nested sorting a little bit, I don't want to go down off a tangent, but that sounds like a simple problem, right? Like, sorry, my brain is very naive here. Like, you just want to get some items and within a category sort it using some sort of criteria. What was challenging about that? Just for everyone's context, I guess.
I think the most difficult problem is that VisQL was not built to have that sort of sorting in mind. So our dev actually built another layer on top of to translate what you're seeing to the VisQL and then do a further additional processing.
I see.
And that was what ultimately solved that problem. So the VisQLs behave in a way that they did not take into account of things are nested within their own segment.
Within its visual set. Oh, okay.
VisQL actually completely ignored the partition, the visual partition that you see. So that's when you apply sorting. It goes across partition.
Right. And so, that's probably a lot of work then to add that contextualization into the product, because then that just massively changes things like the SQL query that runs in the background. It also changes things like order of operations, because you have to do things nested and sorted, and then you can do all of your other things as well. So that's really complex work. So
and also sorting. That was another thing I learned. So honestly, like I did not know BI much until I joined Tableau. Was that I did not realize that I thought sorting is something you do at the very end when you just beautify the data. But the reality is sorting is something integral to your flow. That was another thing I learned. And then if you look at the product, I think when I counted it, when I joined the team, I counted there were 19 different entry points to do sorting within Tableau. So we have to decide and make a decision, which one do we need to apply nested sorting by default, and which one do we preserve for the existing user who want the other sorting.
Oh, wow. You don't even think about that. You just use a product and it just works when you think it works, and you don't think about it. But you're right. From a computer perspective. And that's really speaks to like the amazing designer that Tableau had, was that I did talk to the right people. And also at that time, the organization was so flat that I can go to talk to Jack McKinley to wonder what the history was and how they came to be, or talk to the CPO. And that was so easy in a small company. So you sort of know the issue very quickly. That's amazing. Thank you for that deep dive, because I think that's like sorting, very simple thing in most people's head, but then the complexity is always beyond what you see. So I appreciate that. So you joined Tableau, you built this capability for nested sorting. I guess, were you a product manager in that role? Were you like just starting out as a product manager?
I was a product manager. I started here at Tableau. And then I also work in quite a few like analytic, like different calculation function. So the way I frame myself is people come to Tableau for beautiful visualization, but I work on the area that before your data become beautiful, that's pretty much my domain. So the things that people have to wrangle your data, combine them and analyze them in a way for them to make sense and finally to visualize, that's very much my area. So if you see me do any demo, I don't make beautiful visualization. In fact, you saw the talk that I've done with Kirk. I gave all the credit to the amazing visualization because I have no sense of the visual that you can do with an amazing Tableau. It's really kind of funny. Like I'm working at a company that know how to make data beautiful. I don't actually work at that part at all. I actually work on the part that make it possible.
You enable it. Yeah, you make it easy for that to work. So it's good. So I think that the thing I'd love to just briefly ask you before we get on to talk about the data model, because obviously that comes next. Like, I'm not asking you necessarily like to talk about like your experience within Salesforce, but what is product management? And that's sort of like sounds like a simple question, but it's actually quite useful to understand in the context of like the product, because I didn't know this until I started working closely with Tableau, how many different people are involved in the products. And so when I started talking to, let's say, developers and then product managers, and you have UX designers. So I'd love you to just give some context of the role of a product manager, I guess, in this context.
Yeah, that's a really deep question, but I'll answer it in a very short form as possible. Is that as a product manager, I really want to look at what the customer needs are, and then translating them into features that we can execute on and deliver to customer. Ultimately, the idea is that we want to be the one to discover the customer needs are, that we can turn into something that we can address easily within our software.
Right. Yeah, that's the shortest but most concise description I've heard. It is what I've sort of believe it to be. Like I always say to like Ravi and Mark, another sort of person I talk to a lot about Tableau, is you make our dreams come true. Like we have these ideas, we articulate the edge of the idea, and then you take those and you go right to the core of the problem and you turn them into like these beautiful flowers and show us things that we'd never even thought of dealing with before. So but
it also requires spending a lot of time together, right? That's why you and I got to know each other over the years.
Yeah.
And then also the other one is that it's not just me. It's just I work with an amazing team of designers, developers, managers, and people who are making this happen. I just happen to be the person spearheading the effort. I'm not the person who is.
You're not the developer.
It doesn't go well, but ultimately, it's the experience that you see. Really talk about the designer that we have, the user researcher understanding holistically the bigger customer problems. Those things are like very much a team effort. It's not a single person.
Yeah, it's
I just happen to be lucky enough to connect with customers.
Exactly. You're kind of the team captain in a way for that feature, but there's many people on the pitch kind of pushing in the same direction.
I would call it facilitator. I would say facilitator. I think the team captain is really depend on the development cycle, which point that somebody will step in as a team captain.
I see.
People like to think I'm the CEO of the feature. No, I'm not. I'm only responsible for a certain part at the time, but ultimately it requires a lot of effort from engineering manager to design manager to different people to even to our leadership, right? Deciding this is that manager.
Right there. Yeah. Very topical at the moment, of course. But let's now pivot to the topic, because I think I say a topic, but really there's probably a bunch of different things that sit within your domain. So maybe let me give you a chance just to describe the domain of things that not necessarily look after, but that actually touch on like the data model, I guess, is what we're talking about. So like how would you describe that? I think you articulate it as like you articulated a vision, but I think the vision paints a picture. So how would you paint that picture?
Maybe I should talk about the context where Tableau came from and why we're going in a certain direction. Yeah. I think the founder had this amazing insight that you can use basically the GPU of your brain, how to process data effectively visually. And then so they built this amazing tool, VisQL, to analyze the data, to help you see your data and see and understand your data. But part of that in the beginning was that they have a relentless focus on analyzing a single table of data. So what that means, they built a very sophisticated but easy to use set of calculation for you to manipulate and wrangle your data into a form that you can generate visual for. So I am literally just standing on these giant accomplishments that the people have done. What I've noticed since then was that as we continue to evolve as a company to be in the enterprise space, a lot of customers have already developed very sophisticated data models already. Yeah. And when they put that into Tableau, they need to denormalize them into a specific view, and then they can need to do calculation to basically twist and turn the data into a form that they can do again.
It's true.
So how about we shorten the process? You have your data model, well modeled in your databases already. Can we just tap directly into that data for your Tableau and then
Yeah.
the calculation will naturally fall out of that. Our hope is that you can do very sophisticated analysis built on the sophisticated model that you already have in your database. And it might
I
not
see.
just one database, it could be data that's scattered across multiple databases. And that's where
Right.
Tableau shine, right? The ability
Yeah.
to integrate with data from anywhere due to the amazing query pipeline system that Tableau has. Be able to put that together. And now you can analyze them as those from one source of data
Yes.
without really
yes.
having to thinking about like where they all came from.
That's a huge, I mean, the biggest thing I've noticed is the number of connections I use in Tableau has massively gone down. And it's funny because the data model came not long after you had this ability to connect multiple data sources up into a connection. So for a long time in Tableau, you could only connect to one connection. So I don't know how to explain this, but let me get the terminology right. You'll probably correct me. But you could have multiple data sources in a single connection. That was the new addition. Previously, it was one connection per one data source per connection. This is the terminology I'm sure you live and breathe by. But yeah, you could only have a one-to-one kind of setup. And so if you wanted to do anything, you typically had to think about blending, think about having everything in the same connection. Then came cross database joins and the ability to bring things together and hook it up. That felt like a massive sort of release, right? And then you had the data model follow that, which then I think did the opposite. I sort of exploded the amount of connections I was using, and then data model comes about and go, oh, right, back down again. And that still works with the data model, but it makes that connection so much simpler, right?
Yeah. People don't realize that like the secret sauce of Tableau is be able to connect to any data live and then federate them and combine them together easily. And as a user, you don't have to think about it. It just magically works.
Just works.
And that is, we're very lucky to have built on that foundation of the connectors and then the query pipeline that Tableau has. There's actually a very robust, for our dev that they describe it, is like Tableau almost has like a compiler in the end. Basically compile what you want into these correct SQL dialects that they can send out to different connectors and
different things
together.
But you give it one interface.
I think that we don't talk a lot about.
Yeah, you're right. Whether it's Excel all the way to, I don't know, Snowflake.
I mean, there are companies that call it Fabric, that Tableau just simply did it and without really giving it a name.
It's just sort of like a throwaway feature. That's no, it's very true. So, I think that's a very that's a very sort of, I like the way that you set out that sort of high level. And so the data model, my first time I saw the data model, it was Bethany Lyons, who was, I think she wasn't a product manager, but I think she was showcasing how it worked. Is that correct? Because I remember Bethany used to showcase so many incredible things about anything in Tableau, pretty much. Sets. At one point, she just did these awesome things with sets. The next, it was the data model, and she showed some incredible demos with that. And that was the first time I was kind of watching her session at a conference, and I was like, wait a minute, like this is going to be huge. But for a while, not many people, I think, understood it. And so I thought I misunderstood it because I left that session thinking this is mega. And I looked around and everyone was just like, it was almost like it was a neutral response. And I was like, isn't this going to make things so much better? But just nothing. And then you started to see a bit of momentum sort of pick up. And then I think even now we're still building momentum, right? And it's still sort of growing and you're still adding to it as well.
Yeah, I still talk to customer who's using single table of data. And I always joke with the team, the greatest feature in Tableau, you can copy like your Excel worksheet and you like paste into Tableau and start analyzing. But the cool part of Tableau that was built in such a way that the table you built, you paste it in, you can add more data to it and you can add more and more. And Tableau will just continue to work. It is not a thing that you do your data preparation and then you analyze your data, but it's very circular, right? So that's why the whole thing about Tableau had this cycle visual analysis is huge, that you can always start anywhere and continue to analyze your data. And then using your visual cognition is a way to validate and see if you're going down the right path or not. And that's still what we rely on.
You're driven by the story you're trying to tell rather than being limited by the analysis you can do, which is kind of interesting because your creativity will always take you much further on. Like you see people learning things in Tableau because their desire is to achieve something visually. Like they can see the story they want to tell. They can see it in the data. They can muck around with it, maybe build a bar chart and they go, this would actually be better in this format. You go to do it and then you're sort of wrangling the data. And I think it's why I feel like what you see in Tableau is often very beautiful compared to other platforms. It's not that other platforms can't do it. It's just other platforms don't lead with that creative element first, right? The VizQL, as it were.
Yeah, it's very inspirational, right? So like when I give a talk about Tableau in general to anybody, the first thing I do is I open up Tableau Public and just scroll through the list. It's just amazing visual, see the art of the possible, right?
Yeah.
And then even myself, I cannot do any of that. But I know that I can create the data for you to go visualize it. So that's very much I focus on my thing. In fact, I was just on a customer call earlier. She just got newly introduced to Tableau. She's the head of the Center of Excellence for her company, and she didn't know like even where to begin. So I took her just go through Tableau Public. This is what you see. And then you go to Tableau Exchange and you want more stuff to augment what you can do with Tableau already. Go there. So I always say that you come to Tableau because of the visual, but you stay for the analysis.
You stay for the ability. Definitely.
Product,
That's a great way to put it, actually. That should be a t-shirt.
I should.
Come for the visuals, stay for the analysis. I love it. Because
ultimately, that's what we are really passionate about, building more analytic capabilities in the product without even you knowing it. You just know you have to do it in order to get to that visual, right?
Yeah. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt with you as a quote.
I would be honored you wear that.
I'll send it to you. Oh my God. So let's get into the sort of the bigger topic then, data model. Like if you were going to describe it to someone, let's say there's someone watching this right now who doesn't know if they've used it or not. This is the thing, right? Like how do you describe something to someone like without, hold on, let me take a step back. When I started my channel, the biggest problem I was trying to solve was how do you teach someone like a topic they don't know enough to search for? Does that make sense? So an LOD, for example, you've opened Tableau Day 2. There's no way you know the terminology of what an LOD is. You'll try and do a few things in the product to try and use it. And you won't struggle. And then you might sort of leave it a week, Google it, and then you might come across a blog, and then you might find something and you're like, oh, it's an LOD. Okay, now I know the term, Google it, boom, all the knowledge. How would someone approach the data model in the same way? Because you can go to the Connect window, and I think it's just the default, right? So if you didn't know what the data model is, how would you describe it to someone if they're using the product today?
To be honest, I still struggle that explaining to folks who are ahead of this area what that really means. So I always start with, if you've ever dealt with data, you always have a bunch of columns, identify what are the different fields, right? And then each row is a different instances of the same data over and over again. So that's a table of data. So people always start with that journey because they're very easily familiar with your spreadsheet, for example. You always analyze data in an array format, right? But then when you start looking at the deeper meaning of these different columns, some columns have natural affinity to each other. Like first name and last name really belong to the full name column, right?
Yeah.
And then if you look deeper, each instances of a name is really about an entity of a person.
Yeah.
So then the next level down is maybe you can separate the list of name from the list of product of that people buy. And maybe they buy these products of different geographic location, and you might want to answer a question about geographic location relative to the other ones. So that's where the data models start becoming a reality, is that these conceptual entities in your head really starting to become standalone tables in their own right. And now a data model is about describing the relationship of these different entities and how they work together. So when you have a list of sales transactions, you always want to know who are these customers. Are these customer members of a club, and then when did they buy it, and where did they buy it, and what product did they buy. So they naturally start becoming all these different entities. And these entities are represented as logical table within Tableau. But then when you answer a question, you anchor yourself. If I starting from product, who's buying my product and when and where, right? Or if I started with where, what products are being sold and when to which people?
Yes. Yeah. Same question, different order. And I think that that explanation you had of like domains is really interesting, because I think for a long time, people's view of Tableau was that everything had to be pinned to a record in some way or form. So you built these really wide or tall data sets, depending on your philosophy, but everything needed to be on the record. And so you had really deep blog posts about scaffolding, so you could like generate these like weird, like beautiful charts. But for Tableau to do them, you needed a record on every row. So people were scaffolding all sorts of stuff in there. But actually the data model, I think broke this for me. The first time my brain blew up with the data model is I made a video about how to do a date scaffold with just one Excel file to solve this, let's call it support ticket problem. Basically, how many open tickets in any given day? The SQL query to solve that was really sort of convoluted, and you had to maintain the context window for long enough to keep the running total correct in any given day. With a data model, you don't have to do that. You can even filter to just 1 week and the number will still be correct, because you just scaffold you create the data model that creates a scaffold, and then at query time, Tableau is just figuring it out. So that to me was just huge. And
to bring back Kirk, right? To bring back Kirk, his recent blog, right? Net Tableau, like SQL for you. That's exactly what we do.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that SQL is probably more complex, and people always ask, oh, can I look at the SQL? And actually you can. It's performance recording, or if you have access to the database, just go look at the logs and you'll see the queries that Tableau is firing. So that's good. And then over the years, Tableau has added to the data model, right? So it came out sort of Shippoint 1, it was just the noodle, they called it, right? There was a lot of emphasis on the noodle, something sort of novel. And I think at that time it was kind of the basic Shippoint. You just had the ability to do relationships. There was some limitations, but over the years you've kind of added, I think, very thoughtful key things. It's almost like you've got a to-do list and you've thought about, like, let's do it in this specific order because these are the really important ones. And there's also a sequence to that. Is that fair to say? There's like a really important sequencing to each of the one? Yeah. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So first off, I also want to start with that Tableau did not invent the data model. Right. Data model has existed for a long time.
Correct.
The way Tableau built, adding the data modeling capability to the existing Tableau is about making it easier. Basically, lowering the bar. So even if you connect to very complex data, you can just bring them into Tableau and you can start that. So that's the first one. So by no means do I want to say that Tableau introduced this concept of logical join. That has existed forever.
That's existed before.
For decades,
yeah.
So we just happen to make it easier so that more people can use it. The second one is that because of the fact that there are pioneers who did this work already, we examined them. And then we looked at them. How do we make this even easier for people to use? Can we do this in a logical way? The TC can grok it very easily. So you start with here. What's the next thing you might need? And that's what we built. So that's why when you see the initial data model, there's only one base table and everything branch out from there. Yeah. And then with your multi-fact, then it naturally becomes multiple base table now. Yeah. And then we also did things in the back-end side as well, like batch processing, batch query processing, and do a whole bunch of other optimization we do behind the scene. And then we also constantly listen for customer feedback. There might be something that uniquely Tableau. So another thing we sort of inherited from the old Tableau semantics is that when we apply filter in Tableau, it's always after all the table being joined together. Yeah. And that speaks to the origin of Tableau, that we only analyze table of one single table of data. So at that point, everything's already happened, all the join already happened. Yeah. So that's why you see waited for so long until this year. That's when you can apply a filter before they participate in the relationship. Yes. That requires a lot of rejiggering of the Tableau, the query tree that we generate.
Right. Yeah, and so that makes sense, because is that a recent 25.1 feature, right?
Yeah, that's
so
the ability
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really cool because the more people that get into data model,
Yep.
let's say the braver you become with really large data sets because you're not
Yep.
having to build these sort of flat sort of things. But the wilder you get with your relationships, the more that can kind of throw you like into like really kind of complex sort of things. So being able to just narrow into exactly what you need, I think is a really nice touch. It just means those things are a little bit easier. I don't know enough about that specific sort of, let's say, capability to know what are the other tricks you can apply to this, if that makes sense. Because I think it's just a data source filter at the moment, right? Like
it's a
on the
data source
logical
filter
table.
for now.
Yeah. For now,
it's actually a massive engineering effort because there are a lot of assumptions that Tableau as a product made. So we actually made that work really difficult to do. So there was a massive engineering effort. So you might know, like during that entire pandemic time, from 2020 onward, relationship, you sort of see a trickle of feature that came out. Mostly the whole team was behind the scene working on re-architecting Tableau, moving pieces around. So that's why if you use performance recording, for example, if you look at published data source, things actually have changed quite a bit. We're actually offloading a lot of these optimization from the client onto the server because that's where we trust the data the most.
Right.
So there are a lot of engineering effort behind the scene, and that also bear a lot of fruits as well. So that led to, you might have heard of VisQL Data Service. That was something that we developed internally for our own to use, but we'd say, oh, this should be productized because we should make that available to external customers. So it's not about such a topic, but more about like I want to share like a lot of engineering effort behind the scene that may not seem to have obvious product right away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure if you've ever worked on a project of any sort, you always reach that moment where day one, it's brand new, you build what you want, it's great, you keep building. 2 years later, maybe 2 weeks later, depending on the project, you're like, now I need to go fix that thing I know I needed to fix. Now you're not dealing with technical debt, but you're having to think in different ways about the same problem, and you're sort of opening the hood, popping the engine out, but you still need to use the car tomorrow, right? Like
and that's the thing that one dev really taught me was that he said, Thomas, that's a luxury of having a successful product. Because if you have not a successful product, you never have to go back and fix your own mistakes, right? You never realize you took some wrong turn somewhere because you already made the wrong turn. The product never made it. So it's actually
to go back and fix things.
It's actually a good thing that we had to go back and change some of the assumption that we made.
That's a great way to put it. It's a luxury.
So it's actually a luxury of being a successful product that we have. So that's
good. I'll when I'm back in my consulting days and the client is asking for fixes, I'll tell them, hey, look, it's a luxury you're asking for these. It means someone's using it.
Exactly. Because if no one's using it, you would not have discovered to be a problem.
Oh God, it's a great way to put it. So VisQL Data Service. Could you explain a bit about that? I know we talked about it before we started this recording, and I think it might just help contextualize what is that? Because you've got the data model, then you've got VisQL Data Service. People know VisQL as being the query engine, the magic, as it were. So what is a data service element of that?
So I think I want to solve this. There are basically two main problems we want to solve. So first problem we want to solve is the reality is there are more and more data coming out of everywhere. So what that means is that if you want to consume that data, you have to know where all your data are, and you need to be able to combine them in a specific way. So that's the first problem that everybody else has, every company has. The second problem this is a thing that we hear from a lot from customers is that when you do a lot of the investment work of bringing all your data, wrangle all your data together inside Tableau, up until VisQL Data Service, that's very much stay within Tableau. The reality, the journey of a data is not just stop at Tableau, but it actually continue on beyond Tableau or maybe integrating Tableau into other places in your tech stack. So that's where VisQL Data Service coming useful, is that it captures the work of your company, that you put all the investment into Tableau, making Tableau useful. But now you can reuse the same semantically correct data everywhere else in your tech stack. And then in the reusing of it, you don't have to worry about where the data came from. You just know that you already processed it with the Tableau.
Yeah. And to be clear to anyone, your tech stack means your web application, your iOS app, your whatever embedded applications somewhere else. Like, it doesn't have to be necessarily a Tableau or even analytics solution. It could be anything, any form of technology.
Yeah, Tableau previously, and it still does, is that we had the embedding. So you basically take a Tableau viz and plop it anywhere. Yeah. But what if we want to break that down further? Can we have components of a visualization?
Correct.
Or what if we go one level deeper? What if you just want the raw data that's coming out of Tableau to power this visualization, right?
Yeah.
So that's where thinking through what are the different abstraction layers that you have within the Tableau tech stack, and can you pull it out and put that API around it so that people can access it? Wouldn't it be nice if you have a PNG of a Tableau anywhere, like in a Slack or a message or in an email, easily without referencing it?
Yeah. And does that fundamentally change VizQL in any way? Because what I've always thought is, when I load a dashboard, I sometimes think, like, I see the spinner and it takes a bit of time. It doesn't feel like web native, if that makes. But when I've seen VizQL data service, that almost feels like it's got like some secret juice. It feels more responsive. With the demos I've seen, like, it just works like any other sort of web application. So, like, if they're all working off the data, the same data source, is it just the fact that it's not having to deal with all the visuals that makes it that much faster, and therefore the API gives you this sort of sharper response?
So I don't know all the details, but my suspicion, the first thing I suspect, is that because it's demo data, it's probably a smaller data set that you're working.
I see. It's a little bit faster than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's first one. I think the second one could also be that there's some sort of caching involved. So
because you've called it,
they might have run that script previously and then just not so long ago in preparation for that script.
And
so therefore it might seem a lot faster. Ultimately, it's still going through the same Tableau processing. I suspect there was some addition for the rendering, but I don't think it's that much. I think a lot, because of the fact that Tableau built on top of any database, a lot of the time, especially spin up the query.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about caching, because if I think about it, in the instances you'd use VizQL data service, the query is going to be broadly the same a lot of the time, because you're powering an application. So as soon as you've hit that cache once, you're pretty much off to the races. You're just hitting the cache every single time. So even if you're filtering, you're still filtering the cache, I guess. You don't have to go so far back and actually live query the database. So yeah, makes sense.
Ultimately, like, what makes sure the spinner happen is a lot of times is physics. Like, as more customer dealing, more and more complex data, it just takes a long time. There's no way around it.
Yeah. Good. Right. Shall we show people some stuff then? Because I think it'll be useful to, like, we've been talking about the, let's say, the heritage of the features, the timeline of the features, the different capabilities. It might now make sense, people, just to show people a little bit of the product.
Yep. Sounds good. Yeah. So let's talk about the probably the most typical customer problems that they would have. So a lot of customers today, they would maybe have still have a lot of sales transaction. They bring that in, and they might bring in, and then sales depending on inventory, and then they may say, oh, marketing might drive sales, for example, and then it might be this sort of data model. But if you actually dig deeper into them, you'll realize the relationship between sales and inventory is actually using more than one field pair. So sales and inventory relate to each other through products and date, for example. And then marketing and sales is probably through product and probably dates as well.
Yeah.
And this is when you start seeing, if you're using multiple relationship field pair within Tableau, then what you're really using, it's a common or shared dimension among all these different fact table.
Right.
So that would be, I think, the first time when you start seeing that this data model could be a little bit more sophisticated than I'm trying to do.
Yeah. You can kind of manipulate those relationships. By relationships, we're talking about the definition down here, right? And you're basically bringing together dimensions from different tables with an operator, and the outcome of that can generate like different sort of analytical sort of gold dust, as I like to call
Yeah.
it sometimes. It's
But
often
going
quite
back
simple, though.
to what we talked about earlier about the conceptual model, the
Yeah.
conceptual model here is the assumption is that you may start with marketing that drives sale, which reduce inventory.
Correct.
But is this relationship really that linear, or is it more sophisticated than that? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this goes back to a lot of time how you create a data model has a significant influence on what analysis you can do. So what that
Yeah.
means is that in order for me to get inventory for a specific marketing campaign, I have to make sure that it has been sold. What if
Right.
I just want to measure inventory without having to go through sales? You can't easily do that today because this data
Correct.
model constrained you because of
Yeah.
the model. And this goes back to why even have a data model, and what sometimes data model can liberate you, but sometimes it can also lock you in.
Constrain
to a
you.
certain analytic path.
Yeah. And that's actually sometimes good, right? Because let's say
Yep.
you're building, I talk about Tableau Pulse as an example, actually, and that's a really good instance where if people are going to go building their own metrics, you do want to kind of make sure they stay on a bit of a track, and you can
Yep.
sort of have a predeterministic sort of set of outcomes that aren't going to go off basis by
Yep.
accident. So it flips both ways.
Yep. And Pulse is good for really identifying the relevant dimensions that you care about, that you want to analyze your KPI with. Because some KPI, Tableau, just because Tableau gives you the freedom to break down and slice and dice your KPI by every dimension, that
Yeah.
might not be useful or relevant at all. And Pulse really about you adding that additional information, right?
True.
Just like a fixed LV would. Then you can fix LV a specific set of dimension to the measure that you care about.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Good.
So continuing further, well, what if I decide to move this model a little bit more sophisticated? What if I have sales and now I break down the sale dates into the like a calculate handle table, and break that down to a product table, and now I can add marketing to here. But now I can answer questions about marketing by date, but I cannot answer question about marketing by product and dates together. Right? So this is a struggle that a lot of customers had with the release of relationship back in 2020, is that they want to be able to add this relationship here that they cannot.
Yeah, yeah. They can't.
So,
do
yep.
you know how I fixed this? I used to
Yeah.
just add a marketing table again to products. Then I'd
Yep.
name the second one marketing for products.
Yep.
And I named the first one marketing for dates.
Yeah. And then you have to keep track of all the field that because now they're similarly named. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I got stuff. What I'd do is I'd hide all the fields that I was going to use, and then I'd rename them to say like marketing -products prod. Then I'd go and change the alias once I'd figured that it was a mess.
This is funny. So we didn't talk about like the flow of our conversation, because that's exactly what I was going next, is that a lot of customer would have a data source, multiple
Like
data
that.
sources within, and they're all sharing some common dimension, and they would create multiple data sources, and then they would juxtapose them next to each other visually, but they cannot calculate it all across. Like you have inventory by dates and product, and they have another data source of marketing, another data source of sale, and you would but you cannot easily filter across them or do calculation across them because they're not part of the same data model.
Yeah. That's true. I never even. I'm a bit of a purist. I half call that a hack, because you're communicating something that's strictly not actually happening. And my experience in consulting, at least, is if you think someone's going to do it, there will definitely someone who's going to do it. All right. So
and
the
Tableau
minute
as a tool, we give you the freedom to do whatever, and we never said no.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, no, I'm not going to build that, because I'm not going to give some. Yeah, that makes sense. But I can see why people would try that totally. And this is what I would expect to happen. You have like supplier one, dates
and then
two, products two.
before the multi-fact relationship we just shipped last year, this is what people usually do. They would have a data source. They would have a dashboard made up of multiple data sources.
Yeah.
And they just visually juxtapose them things together.
Yeah.
And then so because of that, so this here is, I think, where as a product manager, just the fact that we have some amazing customer who gave us these feedback, that I start seeing a pattern across this. Being a good scientist, I would just conduct experiment. Do these seemingly disparate things what do they have in common? Can
Right.
we weave one single feature that integrate all these different complaints about the product into one single
Into a
thing
solution.
that we can fix?
Yes.
And that's what led us to the shared dimension. I would love to
Great.
take credit for this, but the inspiration and the design is really coming from our amazing designers who came up,
Yeah.
who took inspiration actually from what they saw as like the subway system within Europe. So how you
Yes,
can
yes.
take one train from one to another, and then
Yeah.
you just switch between different areas.
Yeah.
And that's where and then what they have,
Different
there's certain
context.
stations that are in common between all the different
Yeah.
lines, and that's what they came
Yeah.
up with this
Yeah. Yeah.
data model.
So let's do things because if someone's watching this, we've probably gone from 0 to 100 very quickly, but there's a lot
Yep.
of value in actually understanding what's going on here. So
Yep.
let me try and decipher this like as a obviously I'm not layman. I know a bit about the feature, but I'll try and decipher it in simple speak, if that makes sense. So we have 4 base tables, right? So
Yep.
inventory, marketing, sales, and support.
Yep.
Every line on here is a relationship of some sort, right? So this implies a little bit of, let's say, deep knowledge around the tables themselves. You have to know how these tables relate. We're assuming that maybe that's built into the database with primary
Yep.
keys and foreign keys sort of inherently. Then what I always struggle to explain to people is like, how would you arrive at this model, if that makes sense? Because like,
Yep.
and this is something that I think Kirk Monroe sort of brings up a lot of the time. It's like,
Yep.
I would never set out to build this. Like, there's no one who I think looks at, like, what is it? Like 8, 9, 10, 12 tables and goes, I see the future, and just like, like just strings them all together and stuff
Yep.
like that. So how do you go from, hey, I have all these tables in my database
Yep.
to, I've drawn this diagram in the way that you've described? Like, what's that flow look like?
Yeah, so that's where I sort of that flow is actually quite circuitous, and it's never linear. It's never as simple
Right.
as this. Like just
Right.
like Kirk and I talk quite a bit, like the superstore that we ship with the product. No one stored the product that way, right?
Yeah,
No one
true.
did all these attributes. That's a very idealized data set. The reality, I think, I suspect people usually start with something like this. They have a whole
That.
bunch of fact tables.
Yeah.
They just throw them
Yeah.
together and analyze
Yeah.
them. But at some point, they realize that, hey, I know I have product across all 3 tables. Can I bring it out as an entity so that I can
Right.
see if my marketing of this product actually lead to increase in sales, and the sales,
Yeah.
if I don't order the right thing in the logistic, then I would drive down inventory. So at some point, people started having these analytic questions, and now they start pulling these out as separate entity.
Yeah.
And that's what lead to the second one, is that as they pull out these different entity, that they realize the data model that they have can be quite constraining and constricted.
Yes.
And then how do they go to the next step? And that's when we build the products to sort of, I like to want to say that the product will grow with you and the data model will evolve as you have more and more analytic question. Because
Yeah.
sometimes this data model might be sufficient for you to answer all the questions you need. But then you realize, hey, what if I want to see in combination of dates and product how I'm doing in sales and marketing, not just product, right? So that was
Yeah.
a big part of what customer asked. And then at that point, I was giving them a hack. The really nasty hack was
Yeah.
that just union dates and product together in a single table.
Oh, true. Yeah. I used to do that way back when.
Yep. Or the other way is even worse. You would union 2 fact tables together. So your sales and marketing on one side, and now you have dates
True.
and products separately.
That's true. And then maybe make sure that the common fields like dates are all in the same ones, then you can,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes like really difficult. So then the next is, what if you have this? Then how do you evolve this? Then the next thing is maybe this is really a separate domain, business domain,
Yeah.
and marketing is different than sales. So maybe it's under a really separate base table. At that point, you just drop it into here. And then now we start to talk about like amazing designer working on dev and doing a lot of user testing. Then we realize if you stumble into this, how do you know this is the right thing? You might want to backtrack, right?
Yes.
So that's a lot of time. Tableau is a very easy for you to undo, but you also need
Yeah.
to know when do you need to undo. is this the right thing? So that's why we inserted these sort of things here. So
Yeah.
the prompt, are you sure this is what you want to do? And even if you decide to drop a lot of base table, we actually have a way for you to separate them into islands.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
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 I'm not sure you're even aware of this feature.
I did not know that. No.
Yeah.
I'm just, I thought is that in the alert? So click on the little bell.
Yeah, it's in the
bell.
alert. Yeah, it actually have a whole bunch of stuff here. When you click on them, you have multiple alerts. You click on them, it will take you to the problem, what it thinks is the problem.
I've never seen that little visually separate unrelated tables. Wow, okay.
Yeah, there are just
That's
so many
completely blown
amazing
for me.
stuff, right? Out there to
Maybe
build
it's because
without
I've been
design.
building like models, and I think I don't know what it is. You know how sometimes something can be staring you in the face, and you just skip right past it every single time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe I didn't know that. But
Yeah, there's all these very subtle cues that amazing designers and out there, and then there are user research have conducted.
God,
So,
yeah.
Thanks to the amazing, passionate customer, I talked to almost 300 customers in building this.
Wowzers, that's an incredible number, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then also because we're such passionate base of customer that I have such resource to lean on.
Obviously spend time with you. Yeah. I have to say, getting on a call with you to talk about, I think we talked about a few things in the past. We talked about InfoSenting as an example, and we spent an hour just going back and forth with different things. It's so interesting. So anyone who ever gets a chance, definitely get on the phone with Thomas, because it's always worthwhile. So
yeah, even our amazing sales team. And I do these enablement sales session with them. And they say, oh, I did not know that. Or customer discovered something and told them, wow, I did not know that.
Why didn't I know that?
These are nice little discovery.
Yeah, little sort of surprise and delight, they like to say.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that's also what makes the product is such delightful to use. It's almost as though it's built by analysts for analysts. They're also thinking ahead of what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
So now that
we've
been to this, go ahead.
So I was going to say, now we're here. How do we get to that sort of thing? I think you're basically saying it's an evolution, right? You kind of slowly build it over time, right?
And the data model sort of slowly evolving with it. So when you do want to analyze marketing and sales separately, but together with products and products and date, for example, then you can easily add this to here.
You start to do that,
Yeah. And notice as soon as you had a relationship, that alert went away.
It goes away because you've fixed the problem.
And then you can always add more, of course. And you can always add.
By the way, itself.
That's another collapse function. So you can add more here, and then. Now you can analyze marketing and sales separately, or together using dates and products together. Or individual, or any combination permutation between these dimensions that they have shared in common with each other.
Right. Yeah. And so if I wanted to do a relationship between marketing and sales, I would inherently need my products table in the mix, right? Because one of the things I always try and explain to people is, although you organize this diagram from left to right, those strings are always attached, so you could almost just move them around, but the relationships stay the same, right? You're not I could flip this round 180 degrees, and it's actually still the same thing.
Yeah. The data model is actually surprisingly flexible. So here, I'm not sure that's another little tidbit, is that notice there are some borders that are a little bit thicker than the other one. Those are the ones that share.
Oh, I see.
So I never
knew what that was, but that is okay. Very nice. So many subtle visual cues. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then also the things that are not shared, they can always be a base table. So you can take this and you can swap it with a support. The layouts completely change, but topologically and semantically it's still the same as
still the same. Still the same, of course, because it is, because it's just exactly what I just said. Yeah.
So that gets back to what you were saying earlier. That's the flexibility of the data model, is that it can accommodate all these different layouts, but ultimately it's the same thing.
It's wow. It's one of those things where it's probably one of those exercises where you need like physical models with a string between them to like really show people like, oh, you can do this and you can do that. And yeah, it would work really well. That's awesome.
Yeah. And this layout itself, this layout itself, and also is pretty meaningful. Like, for example, we can do accessibility. You can traverse to here.
Correct. Yeah.
That you cannot do with other tools. Like you can go back to inventory. If you go back to inventory, now you can go back to dates, or you can go to product.
Yeah.
You can select the relationship easily. So the layout not only has a meaning, it also facilitates accessibility as well.
I would argue that's not just great for accessibility; it's also great for training. And if you're screen sharing, actually, that to me, like there was a saying in accessibility where, like, when you build with accessibility in mind, you lift the tide for everyone who's using the product, because accessibility helps everyone. This is a great use case where you're giving people an easy way to navigate with their keyboard rather than their mouse. Actually, pretty common sort of productivity improvement, right? And then on top of that, when you're training, if you're trying to explain to someone which relationship we're doing support call, like that is just a much better way of highlighting the exact relationship you're talking about. Because when you say this one, like which one am I talking about?
So and then they really actually trace the path. Like this is like the amazing stuff that are like a team that, by the way, one single dad did this on his own.
Amazing.
With the help of our designer. All that
That's crazy.
One person. Is that amazing? Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But maybe shows the depth and detail it goes into, right?
The craftsmanship. That's why I really appreciate the folks I work with. The amount of craftsmanship and pride in the work. It's really amazing. It's
a reflection of their work as much as it is like a feature we love to use. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I want to make sure we give back to the community, like for all that support. Like, I wouldn't. Oh, by the way, another feature I sort of accidentally show, I didn't go into detail, was this high-end show. This whole visual thing was from working with 2 customers that we came up with this feature. What if something becoming really complex and you just want to reduce the visual clutter?
Oh, I see. And so you're taking the base tables and you're minimizing everything.
And now when you hover over them, it will highlight them. So notice it'll highlight the one that are related to them.
So I see.
It's related to all 4, but product is only related to 3. By keeping the anchor table there, now you still have that information around. That's why it did not completely went away.
And why is parts is blue? Because that's the one you clicked on. Is that right?
Oh yeah, part was selected because marketing. Yes, that's how marketing.
That is a lot of.
Yeah, notice even though there's no direction between parts and supplier, but if you have a supplier, there's a relationship. But as soon as you expand them, now you see the relationship.
Yeah. I have not done a proper video on the data model yet, and like part of the reason, I'll be honest with you, is because I was half scared I'd miss details like this. And you've just vindicated my thing. Because I was like, I needed to spend so much more time in this. This is why I'm tag teaming with Kirk, because Kirk is so intimate with all of this stuff. And I think between the two of us, he brings that really deep knowledge of data sets and data modeling. He's written a book about it. But then what I want to do is try and take this abstract world and potentially use animations to kind of show these concepts. With the data model. I think we're gonna do a really nice sort of job to bring it to life. So I'm really excited.
So a lot of these from I learned a lot from working with Kirk together, learning from the history. So this is not the first BI product he's worked with. He worked with any BI product.
Yeah, he's been in the game for a long time.
And his customer knowledge have been amazing in making this a lot of stuff possible. And we continue to. I still show him stuff, and he showed me this is how he used them. I actually met with him earlier. I was joking with it. I definitely don't want to live in ivory tower, design anything in the abstract world, but rather really anchor this in real life customer use cases.
Yeah. And it's very evident, actually. And I think, you know what? I've had like a realization, which is in BI, there's like 2 types of work. There is work that is delegated to the BI or analytics team, And let's just say that that's normally quite procedural work. So like you have these reports, they need this solution, you build them. And the problem with those is that each solution is almost in isolation, right?
Yep.
And the reason why this feature probably doesn't get enough airtime in those types of workflows is because you build the connection to solve the problem at the time. And one thing that doesn't happen enough is this whole like, what if we built a data model to solve a bunch of different problems at the same time? Yep. It requires someone in the team to not be in the dashboard, but actually be like separate. So it's weird because you're almost talking about a data modeler, like exclusively in the team, whose only job it is to facilitate models that help the dashboarders do what they need to do. And so you constantly iterate this. So you couldn't arrive at this just by trying to build one solution. You probably need like 4 or 5 very well thought through dashboards to drive this kind of adoption, this kind of usage. But if you can nail it, then this is so much more optimal. It's so much broader, and it's just one connection. You can really sort of let your analysts loose with it, and they can do so much with it without constantly having to go back and forth with the data engineering team to stand up this and that and write you some SQL to do X. All of that stuff would just be much, much simpler. So yeah.
That's why that's such an amazing insight, Tim. Like, I think the one part you asked me about data model, I think I missed completely, and then this is the key insight, is that you want to create something that multiple people can party on together.
Yeah.
Without having to build your own solution.
Yes.
Or you want them to build something that's durable and reusable.
Yeah. Rather than you want people to ask like, what is out there that I can use to answer this question, right? It's kind of a very different problem space. Because again, like it's maybe because Tableau is a victim of its own success. Tableau's always been about, we'll help you get the answer. And so you start with a connection. It's
no matter
always
what,
been part
as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. You just do it, like figure it out. But in some respects, I think the world we live in today, where analytics teams are so much more demands on them, so much more robust, but also from a governance and like reliability perspective, you need much more enduring solutions. This approach sort of yields far more results and actually can save a team a ton of time. Especially if you just get the trivial requests. You know how people fire down requests from like CEO down, and you've got to build them in like half a day. Oh, I want to know why this product's out of stock. Like, what's going on? Well, yeah, this model answers that, and you don't need to go out and just bring the inventory again in and products and join them, and then off you go. You're just creating noise for the sake of it. And then someone will set a refresh because they assume the CEO will look at that dashboard every month. No one ever looks at it. And then 3 years down the road, someone's cleaning out the server and that report's not been touched in a year. That's the life cycle in a nutshell.
The other one I also want to talk about is that this is like a very idealized end state. But the reality is this might not be the end state that everybody end up with. The hope is like with composable data sources, we're basically laying the semantic foundation. The hope is that each team might own their own data sources in the future. And you just have a way of combining these data sources together.
Communicating with them. Yeah. So these are all different domains. You might say in the product team, marketing, parts team, but then what you're really saying is, this is how I relate to the real world. Each of these domains. It's actually a very interesting way to look at it. Imagine if this is actually like a map for how your Tableau server is organized. these are the different domains and projects you have, and it's actually the best way to look at it. It's a business semantic kind of model, and by that I mean it describes how the business works as much as it does how the data works together. Sometimes those two aren't always the same, and that's why as data professionals we learn a lot about businesses because we see how they're actually structured through data, and this is a good way of sort of actually pushing that home.
In your daily work, how often do you have to go back and re-examine the semantics you put together and then rejigger them and reuse them or repurpose them? And like, how does that work like in your work with clients?
It's interesting because it tends to be tactical. This first approach I was talking about, because the majority of the consulting I do, it's very weird. Like, visualization is not actually the primary request. The primary request is a capability. So in a lot of the work I'm doing, like if I take insurance as an example industry, the capability the customer will have as an example is, I need to be able to improve our ability to underwrite a set of premiums, right?
Yep.
Now, in order to do that, the semantic model to execute that is actually extremely complex, because it's sort of different to this. Let me explain, because it's sort of, this is an interesting one. This model assumes everything is happening at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So the dates column in here, everything is relating to what I would say the same date context. But if I take like insurance underwriting, it's quite possible that you can have this exactly the same model, but it executes itself over like 20 years, like the length of an insurance premium, right?
Right.
And so you never have the full picture, but the full model exists. So for a single claim, for a single type of analysis, you might never have that full picture. Some people will never make a claim. So there's just large parts of your table that just aren't getting used for that bunch of users. Then there's some people who make a claim all the time. Right? So again, there are large parts of the table being used, but not being utilized elsewhere. And then on top of that, you have, like one-off payouts, or, insurance companies do things like they put money in financial reserves and they need to calculate the interest over time, and they come back to that. That in itself is a whole financial different model. Then you have like the actuarial science, right? Which is, the actuarial science is about calculating the risk. Like, if we've got 1 million of these people on this and 1 million of that people, how much do we need to charge them in a premium to make sure the house always wins? That's basically insurance, right? And then there is this like final part, which is different teams have different interests in that whole map. So claims team don't care about premiums. They're just processing a claim. Premiums team don't care about claims. They're just processing a premium. And all of that comes together in a very complex way. So you would never have one person who builds this semantic model in an insurance context, right? Yet it's the correct one. Like, this is basically like what I'm trying to get at. And so you would end up with, I think, probably, let's say 13 different models, when it could actually just be one model if all those domains like talk to each other a little bit more. So
but the reality is, until the question need to be answered, they might not need to come together, right?
They might never, exactly. And maybe there's a benefit to that, actually. There's probably, you're totally right to say, just because you can doesn't mean you have to. Sometimes the art of using a good tool is knowing when to stop, right?
Yeah, that's the key part, is like, knowing just enough to use it because you have that need. I also encourage customers, just because I can do this doesn't mean you should be doing this all the time.
You should be doing it all the time.
You should use really use the right tool at the right time, in the right context.
It's a really interesting problem. Like, I need to find a better way of articulating, because I feel like in that context, in that insurance context, there's always something about insurance companies and the way they handle data that makes me scream on one side of my body, but then on the other side, like, I totally understand why they live in the world that they live in.
It's like people, right? They do things for serving that needs at that time, and
correct.
We can't expect people to know what they don't know.
I wonder if AI might be the change in that. Like, AI wanting to have agents or whatever, be involved and stuff, leads people to like go to the corners, go answer go enable the ability to answer those questions you haven't needed to answer because AI might want to answer them, right? Like there's this new element in people's heads that they're like, oh, we better actually make sure all this stuff works, right? Because we might need
especially AI driven by neural net, right? They're trying to find the underlying pattern of things that might not be immediately obvious to us.
Correct. Yeah. So if you've never built them, there's no way. Like that's a downside and upside with AI. AI doesn't invent new things. It's very good at like manipulating things that have already been done, like harnessing and synthesizing what's already been created by someone or something. So if you don't have a strong semantic model, like the AI model isn't going to give you better results. It's not going to like. I'm in two minds whether he could even build it for you because there's so much inherent business logic that it sits in people's heads. Too many organizations, like too many. That the most important logic sits in here, not documented until you talk to someone and they tell you it doesn't work like that. You say why, here's why. And then they like reel off 12 things.
And then, especially for you, it's really hard to be able to switch context and immediately learn quickly, right? In different environments.
Yeah. I mean, that's in a weird way. That's kind of actually what I enjoy. Like context switching is really fun because the thing with this is like once you've seen this model, once you know how to answer this, it kind of actually gets very boring, doesn't it? Because let's say this is your model for your entire company, and people keep coming to ask you, and then. The first time you build this, you're super excited. Oh yeah, here's a data model, it answers all your questions. If you keep saying that for a year, you're like, here's a data model, it answers all your questions.
But then I think if the right that's the thing is that the another assumption that we made here is the assumption that we don't have new data. I think that there'll always new data and there'll always be new question. Or the other one is just because we did things we used to do it a certain way. If we do it again, we might get the same results anymore, and that requires you updating the model at that point. Right? All of those things, I think, standing in the ivory tower, we could talk about like it's abstract, but the reality is quite different because things are constantly changing. From talking with customers, that's why they came to Tableau looking for that escape hatch, that flexibility.
Exactly. And it's good you have that relationship because customers believe that if they come and ask you that question, there's probably something you can do about it. And for those customers, these are big problems like these. This opens up. They know how to solve the problem. They have a hack, but they don't think the hack is suitable. And they're trying to say, hey, you can make this simpler for me. It enables this like £1 million question that I can now be able to answer, and someone else can do something with that question and answer.
And they also question that we just hit the limit, like especially with structured data, you hit the limit of what SQL can do. Because if you look at graph database, they can do things that SQL cannot easily do. Or if you look at vector databases, it can find relevancy that SQL cannot easily do.
It's very inefficient to try and do it using SQL.
Exactly.
You need something completely different. So, man, this has been so good. I love it. And the funny thing is, like, there's still so much more to this. We could probably talk for like another hour or so. And,
we can talk.
I always like to say to people that, look, joins and unions still exist, right? You could still do them. They're just inside of these boxes. So you double click into any one of them,
you can still do
and you've got the traditional thing. So this is like a layer on top of all of that. So like if you've got any sort of, let's say, dated knowledge around Tableau and you're feeling, this is all too far in, you can just still do what you need to do. But what I always encourage people to do is just try this, especially as a way of learning. Like it's not until it does something you don't expect will you actually start learning from it. And I think for a lot of people, they avoid using the data model because they're worried about that moment when it will do something they don't expect, they don't understand it. And I think that's actually the best way to learn. Use it when it does something you don't understand. Even in 25.1, there's this new graphic that shows you which part of your data model is being used. I love that feature. Really, really nice. use that, diagnose it, get a pen and paper out, limit it to just maybe 3 rows, and just map out what's happening with each table as you do that. And the minute you do that once, you'll always understand that relationship or that pattern in the future. And I think that's how you decipher these things. And you slowly build it up, then you'll try some tricks and you'll try a few more. Next thing you know, you're off to the races. You fully understand it. And again, most people's business context doesn't change that much. So once you've figured it out for your business, you're probably done. You don't ever need to like relearn it again, right? Unless you change jobs or you're a consultant. But if you're a consultant, you have no excuse not to know this. Like,
this is a great conversation. As we were talking, then I started getting the inspiration of, you know, how earlier we talked about Tableau Public. You get to see the art of the possible with the visual. I wish there was something like a Tableau Public for the data model, the analytic question you could answer. Right?
True.
But unfortunately, it's not as visually attractive as that's a visual that you can generate Tableau. But a lot of times I wish, like if somebody starting in an area, they can easily find what are the KPIs for a specific industry, right? For you to actually to answer. And then you need to know about what the data you need to have and how do you need to organize your data, model in a certain way to answer those questions.
Well, to be honest with you, like, there are so few kind of big industries. I think it's probably possible just to do a one and done, right? Like we could probably get like, you just go like a conference, you take like, they do like those industry breakouts. So just take each of those industry breakouts and then figure out like, what are the key, like, you know, areas of challenges. We know what it is, for example, with health. You could very easily do it with insurance, and you don't need to be too deep. You just need to have these sort of domains, I guess, within those industries that are relevant. And then you could just say, well, here's a model that will enable this kind of company to answer all of these types of questions. And here is how. And that could probably be like a little, it doesn't need to be like Tableau Public. It could just be like a blog series or a white paper, as Tableau used to do back in the day, right? Like it could actually be something really fun. Maybe we could work on it together. I'd love that.
I would love to, like, given like your customer knowledge, I would love to see like, this is a question. Maybe you can structure data this particular way. Because now we're getting to a pattern of using C. Come to like tableau.com and blog about the stuff that you know. Happy to work together and get that.
Absolutely. Maybe that should be our project for this year and next. And the next year, we'll build this sort of library of like conceptual semantic models. I don't know what we call it. We'll come up with a sexy name some other time. But semantic models that you can use to answer a question, just to give people an idea of how to approach problems. And then, you know, it's quite easy nowadays to generate mock data sets. So we can kind of create those and show people and showcase, and even do like basic calculations just to say, look, you can try and do this, this, and this. And people might look at that and see that as a blueprint for like how they can then go to their models and do more advanced things or even basic things. You're never going to match an organization's full context, but I think you can give people inspiration, which is what Tableau Public is.
Very easy to bootstrap that process. Because I see a lot of the stuff that you do on the YouTube is really about getting people ready to go, but that could be another industry specific one.
Yeah, exactly. You get the point of my channel 100%. I'm never about complex things. I just want to get you deep enough into the topic that you can help yourself, because that is what I got the benefit from ages ago. Like, I just didn't know where to start. I read a few blogs and I was in, I figured the rest out. So maybe that's all we need to do. So
we'd love to.
Let's do that. Maybe next conference we'll be talking about it.
With each other.
Let's make it a mission for conference 26. We'll have some sort of thing ready to go, and we can talk about it. That's a good deadline.
I'd love to collaborate. It's like you've done such a great job with the community, like getting people understand what's new, and also like what are the things they can help them bootstrap for the different specific industries.
I love it. Right, Tom, we've been going for a while. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I guess if people want to reach out to you, they just need to reach out to you directly, right? Like, is there any way you'd send people to? Is there something on the blog or something like that? What's like your spiritual home?
Like if they want to know about Tableau data model, they can just Google that Tableau relationship data model, multi-tab relationship, and then there's a huge amount of content that's created by our content team that is super useful. and very approachable. You don't have
Yeah,
to
it is.
speak the lingo of data modeling altogether.
Correct.
And that's what we're very good at. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that more. And of course, I think conference, you'll be at conference, right? So hopefully we'll get to see you there. And
we'll have a booth, data modeling, come by, say hi. And also we are continue to innovate. So we're actually doing user research at Tableau Conference as well. So come by and join our user research sessions. Yeah.
See some of the future stuff. I always recommend people actually go do that because two things, you get to meet the product managers, and what I often find in those sessions when I look over the shoulder is like people learn things they didn't know about the product, because they'll say to someone, I wish you could do this, and I can always see the Tableau person's like, but you can. And you do it, and then they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And I'm like, snap! Like that's half the value of going to those sessions. You actually learn how to use the product as well. So really good.
I remember the first time we meet, you and Robbie came to one of our research back in the day when we did multi-pack.
Yeah.
They didn't have a fancy name back then, but
no, it did not. But no, it was back in the old days. Like I think multiple conferences, we've just grabbed a table and we've just gone for it.
Yep.
So it's the best way to do it. Just get involved.
No, thank you for having me on. I really enjoy our conversation. You're really inspiring. Like, have some ideas you stir up in me. Like, I really thought of like what are the things we can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's definitely pledge to collaborate on that project. Maybe that would be like a really useful thing. I think it will help people. So I think we should definitely do that. And then we'll see where we go from there.
Sounds good. Well, have a good evening, Tim. Thank you so much. For staying up late for me. Yeah.